Hello, and welcome to the RTS's panel with the Wilderness cast and crew. We'll be going behind the scenes and seeing how they brought this novel to screen and to life. So I'm delighted to have with me cast members Jenna Coleman, Oliver Jackson-Cohen, Ashley Benson, and Eric Balfour. And as well, we have the writer, the adapter of the novel, Marnie Dickens. So, without further ado, so you know what we're going to be talking about, here's a little teaser by way of the trailer.
If you'd have seen us, you'd have hated us. This perfect, happy couple. Charming husband, loving wife. Finally, I could just be me. That was my mistake.
It's the trip of a lifetime.
Well? Are you going to introduce us? What brings you here? Same thing as you, I guess. Nature, fresh air. You've got to admit. It was the perfect place for an accident.
Mrs. Taylor, I'd really appreciate you coming down to the station.
What's the joke?
No, we're just getting to know one another. Will talks about you a little bit. What he does say is that he needs you.
Liar.
If I am such a burden to you, then why are you still with me? Why don't you just leave?
Because you're my wife.
You're supposed to say it because you love me! Don't worry, darling.
So as you can see, there's plenty to talk about, and we're going to be very careful and not give away some crucial spoilers. So I have written my questions very carefully, and I hope that cast and crew will be equally conspiratorial so that no spoilers for audiences who have yet to see this very gripping psychological thriller set in the wilderness. Let's start with Marnie, writer. Tell us about the process, Marnie. Why this book? Why now? And what did you want to make sure landed on the screen from those pages?
Why this book? Because Liz Kilgareth, my fellow executive producer, handed the book to me and said, don't ask any questions, just take yourself into a very dark room and read it. And I did in one go because Bev has written such a sort of propulsive page turner of a book. And the central premise, I guess, that grabbed me and made me think I wanted to be the person to adapt it was this young woman so madly in love that she's kind of given up a lot of herself for her husband, including her career. And then that goes catastrophically wrong. She's been terribly betrayed. I don't think it's a spoiler to say. And then has this extremely fun wish fulfillment element of how far would you go to get revenge on the person who ripped out your heart. So that just felt like a very juicy premise to start from and to sort of hold on to as we go forward and follow Liv on her journey.
And as you've said, there were some crucial elements that you did want to keep, but readers of the novel by B.E. Jones will notice some changes. How did you decide on those biggest changes and why?
It's always a tricky balance. You want to feel that, you know, Bev's not going to be watching it at home and jabbing at the off button. And I think she's very pleased with what the cast and the crew have pulled together to sort of represent her book. So it's a balance of wanting the author's original vision to be honored, but also things that work in a book just don't work on screen. So we had to do a lot of building out. And I think there probably could have been a version of this show that was a glossy thriller with a really attractive cast doing attractive, you know, in an attractive location, doing dastardly things to each other without consequence. And that would have been very fun. but it felt like we all wanted creatively to dig a bit deeper and sort of serve up the cliche of these stories, enjoy the fun of them, and then explode them. So I think the biggest thing that we all changed, because it definitely wasn't sort of me alone in my garret, was really getting under the skin of those characters and working out exactly why they're doing what they're doing, particularly with our lead couple, because Liv does a lot of pretty out there things across the course of the series. And it's not that we have to be applauding everything she does. I think it's interesting which side of the line the audience sit on with that. But I think we have to at least understand why she's doing what she's doing.
Thank you. Let's meet the cast. First of all, Jenna, let's start with you because Liv is central to operations. Tell us about what jumped out at you about her from the script the moment when you picked it up. What was the first thoughts you had about her? Did you like her or loathe her or somewhere in between?
Kind of somewhere in between, but I think it's, she's very sarcastic and quite unsure of herself at the beginning. But for me, it was the arc of her journey is quite an extraordinary journey, especially over the course of 6 episodes to go on. To start with, it feels like a very familiar feminine coming of woman story. Someone who's kind of unsure of her voice and in her body and who she is, and trying to mold herself into a version of who everyone else wants her to be. And then over the course, through quite an extraordinary roller coaster, high adrenaline tale, she kind of ends up in her own body and in her own voice.
Did you like her by the end?
Yeah. I did.
I did.
I think this is what Marnie was saying. I think it's not, she's flawed. And I think what's really interesting and what was very hard to kind of pitch and play was ultimately she was betrayed. But I also had to find the line between how on earth do we, at the same time, she is plotting the murder of her husband, and how do we toe that line between keeping the audience behind her on that on that trajectory, which is kind of challenging, especially when I feel Ollie makes the job a lot harder when he comes in and makes Will extremely three-dimensional and likable. So that was like a really great challenge, because it was kind of, how do we keep that to and fro and keep the audience going to and fro between the two characters?
I think people will relate to somebody who is both enthralling and wonderful and pretty exasperating, perhaps not to the extent of Liv's reaction. Yes, well, let's meet Ollie, who has created Will, this 3D character of what could be potentially quite a cardboard figure in terms of his cartoon. So, Ollie, can you tell us about Will and what you noticed about him and how your feelings towards him changed?
Oh, I mean, I think Marnie and I discussed this, I think the first time we ever met, which was that in order for the whole story to be plausible, Will has to, and for her to remain with her husband, there had to be something about him, and there had to be something that could be overlooked or forgiven. And so, sort of what Jenna very kindly said, it was about trying to figure out how we make this person as well-rounded and as flawed as humanly possible, because we didn't. I don't think Marnie, Nora, or any of us were interested in sort of having him just be this villainous, arrogant, husband that, would looked a certain way. And yeah, I feel like that works it doesn't work over 6 hours. So it was about, I guess, trying to mine, and so much of it Marnie had already done and was in the script. But Marnie was incredible. We had 2 days before we even got to filming, where we went through all the scripts, and I sort of made suggestions and she sort of made suggestions, and it was all about trying to make him ultimately someone who is a sort of a flawed human being, and whose behavior you either agree with or don't agree with, but it's still sort of human behavior. And so it was trying to sort of find those moments. And yeah, it was that probably wasn't your question, but I think that it was a really interesting journey to go on with him,
It's like we
especially.
had to find the way to root for the couple together.
Yeah.
We needed in certain ways to want the audience behind them against each other, but then understand why they were always getting back together. So it was
Yeah.
this kind of push and pull all of the time to navigate.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, that, I mean, it comes across on screen, but it's very interesting hearing how you designed it. And then we get to, well, Cara and Garth. Ashley, every woman's nightmare, Cara. So again, how did you make somebody who on the page would make women want to join Liv in all her thoughts, but obviously something special came out on screen, even just in the scenes between the pair of you and Jenna. So tell us about your character and how you went about forming her.
Yeah, with Cara, I mean, she was such an interesting character to play just because, from the outside perspective, it looks like she has everything. She has, a great job. She's successful. She's, everyone's favorite person to be around. She's, kind of like the it girl. But when you kind of get to know her, she's really broken and insecure, and she kind of puts on this facade of having a perfect life. Um, and that's really not the case. And I think also as you go along, kind of when her and Liv are starting to spend more time together and get to know each other, they really do bond over, not feeling good enough, and also the betrayal um, by men in general, and kind of feeling that they're not good enough. And so it was fun to kind of go back and forth and see, where to really push her being an insane like monster towards Liv, and even towards Garth and Will. She was kind of playing everybody, and then you kind of got to see how deeply broken she is on the inside when she allowed herself to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And finally, Eric, we've mentioned Garth a few times. He kind of grows as the story develops. He starts as one person and ends up as somebody, well, just more interesting, I think. He's not just the cuckold anymore. But tell us about playing Garth and how you sort of came across him on the script. What did you think of him at first? And again, because all these characters, that for me the big thing is how they change from your initial perception. Was that your take on Garth as well?
My grandfather used to always tell me to better to keep your mouth shut and be presumed a fool than to open it and remove all doubt. And I think I'm cautious about what I say, but I think Garth was a really small but interesting part of this story, and I approached it as he was really a character who served a purpose to help propel what happens to these other characters along, and so yeah, I was excited that he does start as one person, and I think there were, especially in Marnie's original scripts, all of the characters were really interesting and complex, and the thoughts behind the characters and what they were going through. It was one of my favorite parts about reading the scripts, because I thought she did just a phenomenal job of creating complex characters who there was never a moment, where you looked at the character, like you wouldn't like maybe a horror movie and go, why are you walking into that room? Nobody would walk into that room. Don't walk into that room. All the characters, every time they did something that you sort of said to yourself, like, oh God, don't do that. At the same time, you could justify and understand the complexity of why they were doing it. So, it was just fun to be around all of it. And Garth was, it was fun to play a character that I think starts as this really, sort of joyful, light-filled character who was very open and giving, and he does, you know, obviously in different ways take some really dramatic turns. So yeah.
Good fun. Good fun. What grist to the mill for an actor. You said it was a small role. I mean, I didn't feel like that watching it, but when you get a script as an actor, I guess it's like the question is size everything? I mean, is it more fun to see that you've got a relatively smaller role, but or you know, I mean, tell us about that as an actor. Better to be small and interesting than big and uninteresting.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I said, yes, certainly, I suppose it was more a comment on, you know, that how Garth really is there to facilitate what's happening to the other characters. But I mean, yeah, of course, as an actor, you look at some of, you know, for me, I think about those actors and actresses who've had one incredible scene in a movie. I mean, for me as a young actor, you think about Gary Oldman in True Romance, or I mean, I you know, I could go on, but I just think it's the challenge is just making sure, I suppose, you know, that you don't try too hard. You know, when you do have sort of a smaller part of the puzzle to navigate, I think as an actor, you can tend to be like, oh, this is like, there's only so many moments I have to, you know, make it count. And sometimes you can fall into the trap of, you know, putting pressure on yourself to try to unorganically make something happen. And I think that's the only challenge of that. But
that is fascinating. Yeah, trying too hard. Okay, for all four of you, whoever wants to jump in, I mean, the fifth lead actor in this piece is the wilderness, is the location itself. So what can you tell us about filming in those locations? Where did you go? How different was it to film, and how did it affect how you played the part? I mean, what time were you getting up in the morning? How beautiful was it? But also how remote? So whoever wants to jump in, unless I grab one of you.
Well,
thank you.
We began in Vancouver, and then we went up to Whistler, and then we went to Calgary, and then we went to Banff.
Good memory, Ollie.
And then, I mean, it's amazing. I'm, you know, in my 70s. Then we went to Banff, then we went back to Vancouver, then we went to New York.
No, didn't you guys go to Vegas and
Yeah. No, we went to New York. We did New York, and then we did Vegas, and then we did Arizona.
Oh, well,
we flew home from Phoenix.
Wow.
It was incredible. But I think, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
over the course of how many weeks was that itinerary, roughly?
5 months.
Oh God.
4 months.
Okay.
4 months.
Pretty intense.
Yeah, I felt bad for Jenna. Jenna really, she was heroic in sort of with all the travel and like the early morning starts and the emotional kind of toll that sort of every single.
You followed the crew around with us in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I wasn't in Vegas, and so I didn't shoot anything in Vegas. So I got drunk with one of Jenna's friends, and it was a night shoot, so so just like tagged along. And I thought it was really funny at like 8:30. Like it was quite like, and I think some of the crew were like that. This is quite funny. And then come like 10 o'clock, and it went through till like 4 a.m. I don't think anyone found it funny apart from me and this I was with. So yes.
How helpful was Ollie's addition to the crew on that day?
I think we all felt very supported.
See?
We felt very rallied.
Eric, what were you going to say about the filming of it?
Well, I think one of my favorite parts when we were up in Banff and in Whistler, you know, we spent a lot of days watching out for bears. There was a lot of days where there were bear, like they'd stop us shooting and they'd say, "Wait, guys, we got to stop for a minute. There's a bear coming through." Like, and there would be a bear. It was, I mean, it was pretty. It was unique. I'd never been on a set where we were, you worry about helicopters and lawnmowers and airplanes ruining the sound, but you never worried about bears. That was
The point where I'm dancing to Britney Spears, I'm actually running away from a bear. In my head.
Gosh, no bears were harmed.
But wasn't it? There
Ashley,
was. Oh, sorry.
well, I'm just going to say, arguably, Ashley, your character is perhaps the least favoured by the wilderness location. Spoiler free. Tell us about filming the wilderness for you.
Yeah, I mean, it was, being in Whistler too, that's where we started. It was just so beautiful, but it was, obviously filled with like bugs and just things. And I don't like any of that stuff. I'm not much of a nature person, so it kind of works for Kara as well. But it was crazy. In a lot of the scenes we were hiking and doing, really long takes and going up and down mountains. I think we all fell at one point, like, doing all that. But then there would be times where Jenna and I were crossing a bridge and it would either be pouring rain and we'd have to keep continuing, or it wouldn't be raining. So it was kind of just like dealing with the weather, dealing with the bugs, and then bears as well.
Bears. Ollie, what were you going to say? I'm sorry.
No, there was one day I remember where the bear. What was it? I wasn't there. Like the bear came to set and attacked.
Eat the food, right, or something?
Yeah, it like ate a sandwich. Like
Yeah.
that is.
He was hungry. He came to craft services.
Yeah, ate a sandwich and then smashed up one of those giant water bottles and then left.
I love the unpredictable nature of it. I mean, I wonder if that fed into your final piece without you realizing. I'll come back to you all about the aspect of the epic scale of it. But Marnie, can I dip in here with you and ask about the music? Because Jenna's mentioned Britney Spears, but the music is threaded all the way through as an integral part of how we feel about these characters. Can you tell me about the choices you made? At what point did the music come in to the production? Did you have any influences? Is this your playlist?
It's Liv's playlist, and so I suppose it's my playlist in a way. I always put the songs into my scripts. It's odd to me that a writer would just go, and something plays here, because I think music's a real window into somebody's soul and their emotions. And it felt, particularly with this story, so much of the time Liv is having to hide the truth from various people and playing lots of different versions of reality. And although you have an actor as fantastic as Jenna giving you all of that with, facial expressions when she can't speak, it also is a way just to pop in a way to access what she's feeling or what she's trying to make herself feel. I mean, for the Britney one is a good example of, obviously she isn't in a truly euphoric mood at that time when one might listen to Britney Spears, but she's trying to get herself into that headspace because of the sequence of events that I shall not go into. So yeah, it was a really deliberate choice. Every single track is there to help the viewer understand more about Liv's state of mind at that moment.
And we must mention that you got your theme song from one Ms. Swift. How did that come about, and did it change anything in the way you put the production, and particularly the bits where that song plays, into action?
Well, I'd already written that song into episode 2. It felt this perfect moment, a sort of epic thunderstorm kicks off and the women are pitted against each other and it feels very climactic, and I just think it's an absolute banger of a song. And the lyrics are very apt. So that when Prime Video said, you guys can think about who you'd like to, score the theme, give us your wish list, it was a very short list of Taylor Swift. And we were very lucky that she said yes. And it kind of, I guess, for us, just rounded off this like super female charged show that we were trying to do when you've got Taylor Swift at the helm of it.
I mean, did you get fortunate with the timing, or was this all wonderful design? Because did this happen before or after she broke all the records and became the woman on the front of Time magazine? You know, I mean, the timing seems very, very fortuitous, but I just wonder if that was luck or management.
I thought that was luck. I mean, we've had some dodgy timing too with the show, but that was some good luck, some good fortune on our side. Yes.
Yeah. And this is TV on a cinematic scale. You mentioned Prime Video been coming to you. I mean, did that change when you've got the resources at your fingertips? Does it mean you were able to achieve more of what you had in your head? What are the considerations when dealing with such a huge international company as that, as opposed to, say, a British broadcaster or an American broadcaster?
I think for me, it comes down to, the creatives at the heart of it. And, when I worked with the BBC and when I worked with Prime Video, you just have an amazingly supportive, quite small team of people that you're dealing with who empower you to make the best show that you can. Of course, Prime Video have got amazing resources, but I also think that sort of cinematic scale of it, it's in the book because, Bev does take us on this amazing road trip. But most importantly, it's down to our incredible director, So Young Kim, who we were fortunate enough to do all 6 episodes, and her visionary DOP, Kat Westergaard. And together, along with a lot of other female HODs, they crafted this incredible, cinematic look. I think people talk about a cinematic look it's quite an easy term, but it's actually really hard to achieve. And I think what they did, we have incredible locations that we've talked about, but the way that they shot it was that you were never out just looking at these vistas, you were with the characters. So there's a real intimacy and intensity to the show. And so we really showcase the incredible performances. And that, I think, is, of course, yes, supported by Prime Video, but that's so really bringing it to life, I'd say.
And also, these days, you have the options with these great streaming platforms of making films or TV or something in between. Why did you opt for telling the story in the form of episodic television rather than, say, a 2.5-hour film or whatever?
I think it's just such a juicy story, and it would have felt like we underserved the characters if we did it in a film, I think. And for me, I come from a very unapologetically soapy background. I want those hooks. I want the audience to keep wanting to, whether it's rolled over to the next episode or not, like you want to leave people on the edge of their seats and rug pull them the whole time. And I think that's much harder to do in a film. And I think the fact that you get to be 6 hours in this incredibly twisty turny story with this toxic marriage and an amazing female character at the heart of it is just a gift as a adapter.
For sure. And to members of the cast, how do you feel these days? Because I mean that we just have content, as it's called, but I feel that underserves what we're being offered with such great pieces in both feature length and episodic television. How do you feel as actors when you're approached with something like this? Does it affect how you take the role? Is it that something that you've always wanted to grow up being, film actors, and yet some of these great roles now are coming to you via television and streaming? So tell us your thoughts on that, please. Eric, I'm going to start with you.
Wow, thank you. I mean, uniquely for me, I really started in television. And television has been where I've spent predominantly most of my career. And so I've been fortunate. I've gotten to be a part of some really incredible television series and groundbreaking series. So I have a very blue collar appreciation for television, because I actually like the consistency and the security of knowing who you're going to see every day and building a relationship with that crew and the cast, and you go there and it feels very familial, and I not unlike theater in some ways, you spend a longer time learning about your character and becoming your character and growing with your character, and like sometimes there's a detriment to that, because you get an episode of a script that you haven't read before and you say, wait, what, my character wouldn't do this, and a showrunner aptly looks at you and goes, yes he would, because I wrote it, so he will. And that's that can be challenging.
I'm guessing, can I just check that we're not talking about Marnie, are we, in this instance?
No, actually, no, not at all. And fortunately, like something like this, the scripts were already written and you got to read them all. But I mean, I am just I love television, and I love getting to work in television. But to speak to Marnie, I mean, Marnie is just such a lovely partner to work with as an actor, because she was, I mean, honestly, even on set, when Marnie was there on set, I mean, she'd run around, doing all of her jobs and answering questions for everybody and dealing with script issues. And then, she'd run up to all of us and be like, "Are you warm? Are you cold? Are you warm enough? Do you need something to eat? Are you okay?" And we're like, "Oh my God, Marnie, go relax, we're fine." She was so wonderful and nurturing. And anytime you had a question about the scripts or about an issue or a thing, she was so open to exploring it with you and talking about it and working through it so you as an actor could be like, "Oh, now I know what to do with this." And you always sort of have to be very grateful for that, because that's not always the case. But yeah.
You have some stories. Jenna, can I come to you, because you've done lots of both? How does it affect anything, if anything, the fact that this comes to us via an episodic framework rather than a big film?
I think this in particular, the big difference is that we had for the 6 episodes, we had the same director, the same DOP to cover 6 hours. So I think really in television, usually the big difference is if you've got directors coming in on blocks and then you're the person kind of who's more constant. Whereas this, it was like the beauty of kind of what felt like making a film. We had the scripts, the location, the budget, but we got to explore this psychological tale and got to delve so much deeper over the space of 6 hours. So yeah, I think with this in particular, this limited series, it didn't feel much different other than we all had longer. And I agree with Eric in terms of, what's so nice is when you are doing a shoot that's longer than 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you do build this really beautiful relationship, because usually it's that last week where everyone's bonded and you've got that sync, but it takes a little while sometimes to get there. And yeah, so I'd say that for this job in particular, it didn't really feel that much different from film.
Do you get tired living with a character for that long? When you say, I mean, 6 hours, 6 hours of soap, 6 hours of TV drama is one thing, but this is intense. This is, as you say, it's limited, but it's in its length relatively, but it's powerful. That's a long time to live with a character living at that potency. How do you sort of pace yourself?
I think Live in particular and Wilderness in particular was the endurance level in terms of it was like the pressure cooker and the anxiety. It's like I always felt with Live, it was like, imagine the worst day of your life and then the next scene happens and it gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse, and it's kind of so held. So to be dropping in and maintaining this level of, I think, pure adrenaline and anxiety, and to really sustain that over the series was kind of what was both very exhilarating, because it was almost like we kept having to push it further and further and further. So as an actor, that's great, but I mean, by the end of it, I'm pretty sure my adrenals might have fallen. Potentially.
It's a workout. And on top of that, we mustn't forget that you were doing this in Welsh, you're with your Welsh accent, just to add an extra challenge in the gym. How did you get your Welsh accent? Who did you listen to on TV? or what else did you do?
We had quite a few. We had quite a few. We had quite a few people that we went to. I was working with my voice coach, Roisin. I have to say, I very much committed to the Welsh in the voiceover, in the our first read through. At which point, I think we all made a conscious decision that we needed to find a Welsh accent that was a Welsh accent with someone who'd been living in London for a very, very long time. So we kind of softened it off purposefully.
Right. Gosh, subtle. Marnie, Jenna, and Ashley, there is, as you've touched on, a sense of unpredictable but potentially explosive female power on screen right from the beginning, right from the competitiveness when they're in the city and Liv is at the party and feeling kind of on the outside, and all these women are working together, and her husband has these relationships that she realizes she doesn't know about. And then, of course, we go out into the wilderness, and it just the keg just keeps firing from that point onwards. Was that important to you to bring female strength to the screen, or did it just feel a part of the story? And how unusual is it in the terms of filming and creating TV and other stuff that you've done? Marnie, let's start with you, because you created it, you put it on screen.
It's super important. Like, I mean, I wouldn't do a show personally if it didn't have what you've just described at the heart of it. I mean, it's obviously in Bev's book, but it's not just about the female power is really important. And I think particularly the journey that Liv goes on, I guess Will's actions make her into a victim, and women often get put into that box, and she has her agency taken away, and she really fights across the series to wrestle that back and use the fact that the very way she's been sort of underestimated as a woman, she weaponizes that to sort of come out on top. But it's also, I think, one of the things that we really deliberately explored was female rage, which I think people really struggle to see on screen, and it just isn't really part of our society. Like, we just think of boys like brawling in the playground, and that's kind of half of the course. There's just no female equivalent. There's the kind of cat fight, but that's a very different thing. And I suppose if women were allowed to express how furious they are, and rightly so, maybe we wouldn't get into these kind of, I guess in a way it's a cautionary tale. You wouldn't say Liv's course of actions is a great one, and we therefore think you should go and do that to your partner. But if she's had to bite down on her feelings again and again and again and again and again until she finds herself on a literal cliff edge. So I suppose it was very deliberate from my perspective. Yes.
Fascinating. Ashley, tell us about your interpretation of that and your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, when I first read the script, I had actually just gone through a horrible relationship, and it was very similar to what Cara was dealing with and Liv. And, as a woman too, it's either, you're the problem, and the men, they can kind of do whatever they want. And I was kind of finding myself in that situation. And it kept, you keep giving excuses for whatever reason. It builds up, builds up, it builds up until you finally explode. So I thought that was, the way that Marnie put it in the script with Liv too, the length that she went to kind of protect herself, but also make a point of how hurt she was really, relatable. And I think with Liv and with Cara, I think a lot of different women in different situations really were able to connect with them on many different levels. And that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to the script immediately. And also just having it headed by a bunch of powerful females and women, where it was really amazing. I had never been a part of a project that was kind of run by, powerful women. And I think that really showed on screen, and just the way that the whole thing was kind of ran was just, it felt different for me. It was really nice to be able to connect with different women and not have to always have a male opinion in that kind of way.
How interesting. And equally interested as I will be to hear what Ollie and Eric think of all of this. How did that feel for you to be part of a female-led production?
Can you imagine? I was like, it's crap. No.
Yeah, I'd love you to say terrible.
It was, I mean, it was just incredible. I mean, everything that
How does it change the dynamic, I guess, is my question for you, going in as, the lead actor, but all of those strong women that Ashley and Jenna have talked about around you?
Well, I think I think it's an interesting one. You know, I sort of grew up in a house where, you know, my mum was the one that worked, and she was the businesswoman, and she had her own business, and she so have sort of grown up with these incredible, sort of powerful women in my life. So I feel like I've gravitated, and yeah, sort of throughout my career. I mean, I think ultimately Marnie had written this incredible story. Liz had, you know, so is this and I don't know, it's a hard one, I think, to sort of comment on, apart from all these people are incredible people, and incredibly, you know, interesting and powerful women. I
Just
don't
happen
know.
to be women, right?
Yeah, in a
Yeah.
way, and not to that's not me negating that at
No,
all in
no.
any way, but these are just really intelligent people. You know, and
There
I
you go.
think to have the luxury of being able to work, you know, and it was incredible on our show, because we yeah,
Yeah,
had an
good to hear.
incredible.
Eric, anything to add?
I mean, I think I think that I mean, if I was going to comment on it from a, you know, a personal standpoint, I mean, I've been doing this long enough where I would, you know, frankly, probably the earlier parts of my career, there were more men in these leadership roles as showrunners and directors and writers. And so I've gotten to sort of see the shift, and in the most wonderful way, more women and more diversity becoming a part of our industry. The one thing I would say, and not to, I don't want to jump on a sort of bandwagon or bash men, but there is a different style and approach that I think women have the ability to lead with, that, you know, maybe not all men, it doesn't come as naturally. The ability, I think, of women at times to be very strong and secure and clear, while also being kind and nurturing. I think that balance, at least in my experience, there's a sophistication to women as directors and writers and showrunners I think it's not to say that there aren't wonderful men and male showrunners and writers directors, but I don't know that it comes as inherently or as naturally. So there is a sort of comfort, and actually it makes it easier in some ways, because sometimes, at least as a man, I've been in situations where that director or that writer who's another man can sometimes there can be almost a confrontational element at times where you're like, I don't want to be confrontational. And I think that it was really wonderful. So approached things when she was clear about something and knew what she wanted. There was no question about it. And she was also had the ability at times when you were like, hey, I'm really struggling with this. She could sort of, you know, lend that part of her that was, you know, more nurturing, and lean into that. And I think Marnie did that really beautifully too. I mean, you know, there was a couple times I called Marnie and said, hey, I'm having a hard time with this or that. What do you think? How would you deal with this? And it was, you know, it was really lovely to have that person on the other end approach it that way. So I guess.
Yeah, good stuff. Great. Okay, so I have a final question for all of you. Same question to each. So, but please do jump in. What would you each like audiences to take away from this drama, from watching it? How do you want to make us feel? So let's start with you, Marnie.
I guess I want the audience to feel they've been on a journey, not just with the story, but with the characters, and that they would, you know, that they've had their hearts and minds shifted across the course of it. And I guess that they've felt they were inside of the story. That's what would be really important to me, that they've experienced it with our characters.
Good stuff. Ollie, what about you?
Well, yeah, I mean, what Marnie said, obviously.
She's right.
But also, I guess a sense, you know, Jenna spoke about it right at the beginning, that the journey that Liv goes on you know, is a sort of incredible journey of sort of her finding her voice, and I hope with it that there's a certain element of empowerment. You know, we're shining a light on society, how it's been for so long, and you know, Ash spoke about it as well, about, you know, how it's all to do with the gaze of the male gaze, and so I hope that there's a feeling that people feel empowered, yeah, at the end, with what Liv goes through and how she comes out the other side and finds her voice and herself ultimately.
Thank you. Ashley, what about you?
Agree with both of them. No, you know, it's such an amazing show, and the turn of events are really crazy. It's a huge roller coaster, and I hope that everyone kind of feels all these different emotions and kind of get entangled with this crazy love story gone, you know, wrong.
I'm very wrong. Pear-shaped. Eric?
Yeah.
I hope audiences feel like they need a drink and a shower after.
Oh yeah, for sure. And finally, let's end with Liv, with Jenna.
How do I encompass what all four of you have said? I think, I mean, it's a heightened and it's a heightened and stylized piece, and I think we want the audience, as Marnie said, to be inside and to really emotionally be with these characters in what is a heightened stylized tale. But I think what's so interesting about the piece and what really drew me is, amongst that, what's so potent is it's a cautionary tale, it's a fable, and it's incredibly primal. So I think, and I hope that's the part that people really connect to. And also, actually, Eric, what you said, which was that delicious part of the series, which is where I think Marnie's so clever, which is like, don't do that. Why are you doing that? I understand why you're doing that. And there's something so delicious about, oh my God, don't do it, but do it. And I think that is the kind of this intoxicating, enticing part. And that's a lot of the feedback, actually, that I've been getting from people. You know, whether they're on kind of following Team Liv, Team Will, both of them together, wanting them to be a part. It's wanting the audience to be really investing in that kind of acid trip emotional roller coaster that the tale is.
I think it's fair to say, yeah, Liv puts her hand not just near the flame, but on it for sure. So yeah, that's the magic of storytelling, right? Well, thank you all for joining us today to discuss Wilderness, which is now available on Prime Video. If you haven't yet had the chance to see it, please do. I can highly recommend it. And thank you to the cast and crew. And thank you to everybody tuning in today to watch this panel with the Royal Television Society. On behalf of the RTS, thank you and goodbye.